So we're going to start for Shabbos, which is Nazir Daf Mem. We'll start in the middle of Lamates Amabeis and 39b. The Brisa tells us as follows: Tan Rabbanan Tar, that a Nazir is not allowed to cut his hair with a razor. Ainly Elatar, I only know he can't cut his hair with a razor. Talish Meirad Sifse Kol Shumanayin. How do we know he can't cut his hair with anything other than a razor, like plucking it out or a cream? Talmud Kadoshiyeh Gadel Peras Sar Rosho. Divrei Rabbi Yoshaya. Rabbi Yoshaya says because it says he shall be holy, let his hair grow, even means saying he can't cut it with a razor, and he also has to let it grow. Rabbi Yonasan says Tar Eli Alatar. I only know that he has to cut his hair with he can't cut his hair with a razor. How do I know? Meirad Toash Sifse Kolshu Potter. But if he cuts with anything other than a razor, he's going to be, under those circumstances, he'll be exempt. So Rabbi Oshaya says if he cuts it with anything other than a razor, he's liable. Rabbi Yonasan says he'll be exempt. Mara says Vaksiv. But didn't we say? Doesn't it say in the verse, Vaksiv, doesn't it say Kadoshiyeh? So what does Rabbi Yonasan do with the fact that it says Kadoshiyeh? That you're supposed to let the hair grow. So even now with a razor. So he says, Lameimra, it's to tell us, no, it's to tell us that if you cut it with a razor, you're violating the prohibition of cutting with a razor, and also you're violating the positive commandment of letting your hair grow long. You're missing out on the assay. So the Gemara cites on the bottom of 39b, Tanya Idach, another brisa says, Tar, not allowed to cut your hair with a razor. Tar, I know you can't cut it with a razor. Talash, Meirit Sifse Kol Shuminayin. How do I know that you can't cut it with any of these other things? Can't pull out your hair with tweezers or pluck it out or use a cream. Talmud Omer, that it states that nothing can come over his head. In addition to the tar, nothing can go over his head. So since in the end we're including everything, so what do we get out of saying the tar? Why do we say the razor can't go on your head? So the answer is so it's to teach us. If we want to know this, we want to know that the final tiglachas, the haircut at the end of your nazirus, where you cut off all the hair from your head, that has to be with a razor. So the Gemara says, why do you have to learn it from the word tar? Why don't you learn out from the fact that a leper, when he goes through his purification process, he has to do it with a razor? Gemara says, you can't learn it out from the Mitzorah on the top of our daf, because a Mitzorah is more strict. Mitzorah has to cut off all the hair from his body, whereas the leper just cuts it out from where the Nazir only cuts it off of his head. So you can't learn out from the Mitzorah to the leper. So to be strict. Whereas Rebbe says, Rebbe says, no, you don't need the word tar to teach us that the Nazir has to cut off the hair off his head at the end of the Nazirus with a razor. The pasuk says you're not allowed to bring a tar on your head until you complete your days of Nazirus. The Torah is saying, the Torah is saying, after you complete your Nazirus, then the cutting of the hair has to be done with a razor. The Gemara says, Vaksiv, tar lo yavar al rosho. But doesn't it state tar lo yavar al rosho? So what does Rebbe do with that? Avar lav b'shnei lavin. So he learns out from that you're in violation of two prohibitions. If you cut your hair with a razor, you're in violation of the prohibition of tar, and also in the violation of that you're not allowed to bring anything on your head. Amar Rav Chisda says, Lilkos, to get lashes, ba'achas. That's if you cut one hair. If you cut one hair, you get lashes if you're a Nazirite. La'akev, but b'shtayim, that when you finish your Nazirus, that you're commanded to cut the hair of your head. And so then if you cut off all the hair of your head, but you left back two hairs, then you've not fulfilled the mitzvah of cutting off all the hair from your head. Listor, eno soser elam came megaleach rov rosho. But be soser, that to what's soser? That's to say you have to let it grow another 30 days. Then the only time you reach that point where you have to let your hair grow another 30 days, that's berov rosha. That's by cutting off the majority of the hair off your head. So you're only done soser when you cut the majority of your head. Ubetar, and that cutting off the majority of the hair from your head, that needs to be done with a razor. So the Gemara says, you mean to say you're only do sasira if you do a razor, but not with anything else. Well, Katani, but then we learn didn't we learn in but then we learn in the Brisa that we just cited, doesn't it state Binayla Rabbas as call Amavirin? Doesn't it say that anything that anything that you cut with a razor, anything you cut off your head is considered sasira. So ela ema aintar, anything that you cut off like a razor, that serves the function of a razor, you've been soser. We have a brisa that says something similar. Nazir shetalash meirat sifse kolshu enu soser ela berov rocha uvetahar. According to the brisa, that a Nazir who removes his hair from his head is only soser if you do it with the majority of your hair and with a razor. But that's difficult because that girsa doesn't work. So the Tosa says that the word vitar in a razor here doesn't mean that for soser it's a tar. It means for lashes you're going to get tar. But soser, it's anything ain't tar, like we said at the conclusion of the brisa. Fine. Rabbi Shimon Yehuda, Rabbi Shimon Kol Kishem. Rabbi Shimon Yehuda says in the name of Rabbi Shimon, Kishem she shtei saros ma'akvos bo kach shtei saros soser. Just like 2 hairs prevent you from doing the mitzvah, so too 2 hairs are going to do the sasira, the upsetting the card. You need 30 days when it comes to the cutting of the hair. So even if you cut 2 hairs, that's enough to say you require a 30-day growth. Tanan Asam, we learned in the Mishnah in Negayim, Shlosha Megalchim U'Tegoachatan Mitzvah. There are 3 people who have to cut their hair, and their hair cutting is a mitzvah. Who are the 3 categories of people? The Nazir, the Mitzora, and the Leviim. Now the Nazir is at the conclusion of his Nazirus. The Mitzora is part of his purification process, and the Leviim are the Levites as part of their inauguration. The Kulin Shegilchu Shelo Batar, if any of them cut their hair without a razor, or if they left back 2 hairs, they've done nothing. So they have to cut their hair completely, with the exception of that 2 hair. They have to cut off all their hairs, and they can't leave behind even 2. And they need to use a razor. So Amar Shloshim and Galchim to Gachsam Mitzvah. So Pshita, why do we need a Mishnah to tell us this? It's a Mishnah. It's a verse. Gemara says no. Mao Detemi might have said Mishum Evure Sarhu, that all you have to do is remove the hair. Vafilu Sach Nasha, and even if you use like some sort of cream, even if you use some sort of cream to remove the hair, that would be sufficient. So therefore, the Mishnah is telling us you need to use a razor. Kamash Malon Delo. Kamash Malon Delo. So anyway, we learned in the Mishnah, Katani, the Kuan Shegilcho Shalobatar, and all of them who cut their hair without a razor, it's not sufficient. Bishlam Magabe Nazir, I understand by a Nazir why he needs to use a razor, because it says Tar Yavar show. He says he's not allowed to use a razor while he's a Nazirite, so therefore when he cuts his hair, he has to use a razor. The guy by Leviim Ksiv, and by a Levite it says Tar called Bisaram. He brings the razor on their flesh. All Mitzora Batar Minal, and how do we know that the Mitzora also has to use a razor? If you want to say the Mitzora should learn out from the Levites, can't learn out from the Levites. Shekain to unin taglachas, ve'en taglach asan, ela betar. If you want to say that the Mitzora should learn out from the Levites, you can't do it because the Levites require the cutting their hair, and you want to say that the Levites cut their hair with a razor. So therefore, I want to say also the Mitzora also has to use a razor. No, you could challenge that by saying, the Levites require the waving on their bodies. So therefore, you can't learn from them to a mitzorah, who doesn't require the waving. Nazir. So learn out from the Nazirite. We can't learn out from the Nazirite to the mitzorah. Because when he brings his sacrifice at the conclusion of his Nazirus, he also has to bring a basket of bread with it. So Tomar b'mitzorah. So are you going to say this about the mitzorah? It doesn't require the bread. So you can't learn out from either the Levites or the Nazir. So maybe the mitzorah should learn out from both of them. High Tasi, from which one would you bring it? Tasi Milavim. But you can't bring it from the Levites because Malavim came to Nufa. The group from the Levites require waving. So Nazir requires. So learn out from the Nazir. But you can't learn out from the Nazir because Mal Nazir came from Tang Lachem. Because the Nazir has to bring bread. So Levim yochichu. So we're not from the Levites. What's the tzad hashavah? What's the common denominator? Shein tunin tiglachas v'tiglachas al matar. That they both require a haircut, and their haircut has to be with a razor. Afani aviyas a mitzorah. I also bring the mitzorah, which is something which requires a haircut. Taun tiglachas v'tiglachas al matar has to be with a razor. So Amalei. So therefore, we learn from the year that the Nazir, the mitzorah also has to use a razor. So Amalei Rava mi Barnish. So Rava mi Barnish says to Rav Ashi, but we can break this common denominator. Why? Because you could say Ma'at Savat Shavash Behen Shekin in Karbano Bedalos Tom Mitzorah Shekarbano Bedalos. That you could say the Levite and the Nazir, they don't bring a sacrifice. They don't have the ability to bring a carbon or a viora. They don't have the ability to bring, if they're poor, that their offering is different, and that they can bring a Torah b'nei Yonah. They have to bring the same animal whether they are poor, whether they're wealthy. And so therefore, by the mitzorah, you could say that since he brings a carbon while he's poor, he has that leniency that he could bring birds. And so since the Torah is lenient by the mitzorah, so maybe we could say also, therefore, the Torah is lenient with respect to the mitzorah, not requiring a razor. There's a fundamental question about that. Why is that a lenient? Why do we say that the Torah is being lenient by saying that the mitzorah can bring a poor man's carbon? But don't we say that it's the same level of holiness? That both of them, as long as you have the same intention to heaven, and so therefore by mitzorah that he has a special sacrifice, why would we say that that's considered a leniency by the mitzorah? So that's difficult. So we'd have to say that the Nazir and the Levites, they were being brought to a higher level of they basically are being inducted into a higher level of service. So they can't get this opportunity to bring a poor man's offering. But the mitzorah is being healed from an illness. So he has the ability, we don't want to make any impediment to healing. So then the Gemara says as follows. Amalei Rava bar Misharsha Rava, Hi Tana, Meikara Amar the Mitzorah. Initially, on the bottom of 39b, we said we're going to learn this out from a Mitzorah. That was the brayso that says we'll learn out the fact that the Nazir has to cut his hair. We wanted to say initially, why don't we learn this law that the Nazir cuts for his hair from a Mitzorah? And we said, and he said initially we can't do that because you can't learn from a Nazir because the Mitzorah is stricter from the Nazir. So you can't learn from a Mitzorah to a Nazir. And why is the Mitzorah stricter? Mitzorah is stricter because he cuts off all the hair from his head. And then afterwards in the Bryce it says, Nelef Medina, that we're going to learn out from a Kal V'chomer, from the Nazir and the Levium to the Mitzorah, that you can use, that we learn out, just like the Nazir and the Mitzorah, just like the Nazir and the Levi cut their hair with a razor, so too the Mitzorah has to do it. So first of all, so that's a question. At first, the author of the Brisa says, learn out from the Nazir to the Mitzorah, and we said we can't do it. We learn out from the Mitzorah to the Nazir, we said we can't do it because the Mitzorah is stricter. And now we're saying, learn out from the Mitzorah, learn out a din for the Mitzorah from the Nazir and the Levi. And learn out from them together. And then the Gemara says, Medina Nami lo Yalef. Also the Nazir, and then he comes back and says you can't learn out from the Nazir and the Levi because we could break that Kal V'chomer by saying that the common denominator is different because the Nazir is more lenient, because the Mitzorah is more lenient because he has this Kal V'chomer. So therefore we have a contradiction. The first Brisa, at first the Brisa is saying that the Mitzorah is stricter, and now the Brisa is saying that the Mitzorah is more lenient. So the Gemara says, Amarle, yes. He says there's no contradiction. He aliba d'Rabbanan. The Brisa on the bottom of Lamed Beis, which says that the Mitzorah is stricter than the Nazir, that goes according to the Rabbanan, who learns out the obligation for Mitzorah to cut his hair from the word zikeno, and so therefore zikano, and so therefore that's how we know that the Mitzorah has to cut his hair. V'ha, and the Brisa that wants to say that the Mitzorah should learn out that he needs to cut his hair with a razor from the Nazir and the Levim, that's a libud to Rabbi Eliezer. That goes according to the position of Rabbi Eliezer, that the Torah didn't say explicitly the law of the Mitzorah cutting his hair with a razor, and you need to learn it out from a Nazir because he says that the Nazir is going to be stricter than the Mitzorah. And he's going to learn it out from the word Rosho, that's said by Mitzorah. So the Tanakh, because we learned to the Mishnah Makos, Eino Chayev Ache Yoketenu, that even though there's a prohibition to cut off the corners of your head, the corners of your hair, you're only going to be liable Ache Yoketenu B'tar. According to the Rabbanan there, you're only liable until you remove the corners of your hair with a razor. Rabbi Eliezer says, Afil Wiktob B'Malakek, even if you remove it with some sort of other implement that's not an actual razor, you're liable. My time out the Rabbanan. What's the reason why the Rabbanan say you're liable only with a razor? Tanya, because they're going to learn it out from the word zikano that appears by a mitzorah. Why does it say the word zikano? It says yigalech es kol sarosh es roshav es zikano, his beard. Why does it need to mention specifically the beard? The pasuk already said that you cut off all his hair. So what's the reason why it says the word zikano? Cain, because it says the corners of his head he shall not cut off, that the Kohanim are prohibited to cut off the corners of the head. I might thought even a Kohen who's a Mitzorah is not allowed to do it. Tam Omer zikano. The word zikano is extra. And what is the word extra to teach us? That even if he's a Kohen, since he got saras, he cuts off the corners of his beard. So we say that the mitzvah say the positive commandment of cutting off the hair of the Mitzorah pushes off the prohibition. And from the fact that we need this verse to tell us that a Kohen who's a Mitzorah cuts off his beard, this proves that the cutting off of Mitzorah is with a razor. Because if it would not be with a razor, we wouldn't have needed a specific teaching. And so therefore this proves that the Kohen cuts off his hair with that the Mitzorah cuts off his hair with a razor. So the Gemara says, we know in the Bitar, how do we know that the prohibition of cutting off the hair of a head is only with a razor? It says the corners of your head, you cut off, you're not allowed to cut off. It says you cannot be mashkas. The lashon of ashchasa means that there's nothing left over there. What does it mean when there's nothing left? That means that you completely cut it off with a razor. Gileach means not with this plane, but it has to be specifically with a razor. Okay, it's not ezu gileach sheyesh bo ashchata. Omer is that tar. What's the cutting of the hair that comes specifically with a razor? This is which is the biruch where it's total destruction. That's a razor. So Gemara says, how do we know that the mitzvah specifically needs to use a razor? Maybe even if he cut it with a plane, it's going to be sufficient, and he's done the mitzvah. And the word zikano is ka'asi lashminon. That even if he used this razor, he wouldn't be liable for cutting off his hair. Gemara says no. If you want to say that if he mitzvah cut off his hair with one of these planes, it's also good. The Torah could have been quiet. And I would have said, just like by a Nazir, where he is doing an actual prohibition. What's his prohibition here? That's a question. So the actual vow of taking a Nazir is a sin. Like it says in the Daran, that somebody who takes a vow is called a sinner. So, even nevertheless, he's obligated to cut off his head and pushes off the prohibition of cutting off the corners of your head. Here by Matzorah, the mitzvah, where it's a mitzvah because he didn't get to it through a sin, which is also a question. Didn't the Mitzvah sin to get there because the Gemara and Erechim us all these questions, these situations that he done? I mean, for sure, we would say that it's a mitzvah, that this mitzvah should push it off. So the Gemara says, and furthermore, Gemara's going to ask another question, but we'll stop here on the bottom of Mem on the base. God willing, we'll pick up this daf on Sunday morning, but we'll resume and repeat it on Shabbos Kodesh in person.